The manila envelope arrived on Detective Sarah Chen's desk on a Tuesday morning in October 2025. Unremarkable, except for the way it seemed to weigh more than paper should. No return address. Her name written in shaky handwriting across the front. Inside, a single folded letter and a yellowed newspaper clipping dated March 15th, 1997. 4 nuns missing after orphanage visit. Sarah had been with the Callaway County Sheriff's Department for 8 years, the last 3 heading up their cold case division, a fancy name for what was essentially a cramped office, and dozens of boxes containing the county's unsolved mysteries. She'd seen plenty of anonymous tips, most leading nowhere, but something about this letter made her coffee grow cold as she read. "My name is Robert Henley. By the time you read this, I'll be dead. Pancreatic cancer. Maybe 3 weeks left according to the doctors. I worked at St. Catherine's Home for Children from 1995 to 1999. Maintenance supervisor. I kept quiet for 28 years, but I can't take these secrets to my grave. Those nuns didn't just disappear. They were silenced. And what they found in that basement, God help us all. Someone needs to know the truth." Sarah's fingers traced the faded newspaper photo. 4 women in simple brown habits stood beside a van, smiling at the camera. Sister Margaret O'Brien, 45. Sister Catherine Walsh, 38. Sister Teresa Rodriguez, 29. Sister Anne-Marie Dubois, 52. The caption read, "Franciscan sisters from St. Mary's Convent prepare for monthly visit to St. Catherine's Home for Children." She remembered this case vaguely from her academy training, one of those mysteries that haunted local law enforcement. 4 nuns vanishing without a trace after a routine charity visit. Their van found abandoned 3 miles from the orphanage, keys still in the ignition, no signs of struggle. The investigation had consumed months of manpower and resources before being reluctantly archived. Sarah picked up her phone and dialed the number listed in the letter. A woman answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with recent tears. "Mrs. Henley, this is Detective Chen with the Sheriff's Department. I received a letter from your husband." A long pause. Then quietly, "He mailed that before he passed. Last Thursday. Bobby was eaten up inside about something for years. Wouldn't tell me what, but it was killing him long before the cancer. Said he had to make things right." "Mrs. Henley, in the letter your husband mentions a basement at St. Catherine's. Did he ever talk to you about what he saw there?" Another pause, longer this time. "Detective, my husband was the kindest man I ever knew. Gentle with animals, never raised his voice, but sometimes I'd catch him staring at nothing and his hands would shake. He'd have nightmares, calling out names I didn't recognize. Children's names mostly. And once..." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Once I found him in our basement at 3 in the morning, just sitting on the stairs, crying. When I asked what was wrong, he said, 'They're still down there, Martha. All those babies, they're still down there.'" Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Mrs. Henley, did your husband keep any records from his time at St. Catherine's? Work logs? Maintenance reports? Anything?" "He kept a toolbox in the garage, never let me touch it. After he died, I found a key hidden in his fishing tackle. Inside the box were papers, photographs. I couldn't look at them long. They're yours if you want them." An hour later, Sarah stood in Martha Henley's tidy garage, staring at the contents of a red Craftsman toolbox. Work orders dating back to 1995, receipts for cement, industrial-grade bleach, lime, and photographs that made her hands tremble as she held them. The images were grainy, obviously taken in secret. A basement room lined with small wooden boxes, men in expensive suits talking with a woman in a nun's habit, but not one of the 4 who had disappeared. Documents spread across a table, money changing hands, and in the corner of one photo, barely visible, what looked like a child's shoe. At the bottom of the toolbox, wrapped in an oil-stained cloth, was a small leather journal. Robert Henley's handwriting filled every page, documenting 4 years of horror hidden beneath St. Catherine's Home for Children. March 12, 1997, Sister Margaret asking too many questions about the basement. Told Mother Superior she wanted to inspect the foundation for cracks. Mother Superior looked scared. Called someone after the nuns left. March 14th, 1997, strange men arrived at night. Expensive cars. Heard shouting from Mother Superior's office. Something about loose ends and too much attention. March 16th, 1997. Nuns never came back from their visit. Found blood in the basement utility room. Mother Superior made me clean it up. Said it was just a maintenance accident. Paid me $500 to keep quiet. I should have said something then. God forgive me, I should have said something. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from the medical examiner. Robert Henley autopsy complete. Natural causes. Pancreatic cancer. But Chen, you need to see something. Found this clenched in his hand. The attached photo showed a small metal cross, tarnished with age. She compared it to the newspaper photo of the 4 nuns. There, hanging from Sister Margaret O'Brien's neck, was an identical cross. That evening, Sarah sat in her car outside the ruins of St. Catherine's Home for Children. The building had been abandoned since 2003, its Gothic windows boarded up. Weeds choking the playground where children once played. Local legend said it was haunted, that you could hear children crying if you listened close enough on quiet nights. Sarah didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in justice. And after reading Robert Henley's journal, she believed that 4 brave women had died trying to protect children from something unspeakable. The next morning, she walked into Sheriff Tom Bradley's office with the journal, the photographs, and a request that would change everything. Tom, I need a search warrant for St. Catherine's, and I need a full excavation team. Sheriff Bradley, a man who'd seen 30 years of law enforcement in rural Missouri, looked at the evidence spread across his desk. His face grew paler with each photograph, each journal entry. Jesus Christ, Sarah, if even half of this is true, it's all true. I can feel it. Those nuns stumbled onto something and someone made sure they couldn't tell anyone about it. We owe it to them and to those children to dig up the truth. 2 days later, ground-penetrating radar confirmed what Sarah had feared. Anomalies beneath the concrete floor of what had once been St. Catherine's dining hall. The patterns were unmistakable. Rectangular shapes, approximately 6 feet long, arranged in neat rows. As the excavation equipment rolled onto the property, Sarah stood at the edge of what would become the largest crime scene in Callaway County history. She thought about the 4 nuns, about their final moments, about the courage it must have taken to confront evil even when they knew the cost. The first concrete slab cracked under the jackhammer at 2:17 p.m. on a grey October afternoon. What emerged from the earth would shatter the illusion of small-town innocence and reveal a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of local government, law enforcement, and the Catholic Church itself. But that discovery, and the terrible truth it revealed, would have to wait for the secrets buried deeper in Missouri soil to give up their dead. The first skeleton emerged from the Missouri earth on a Wednesday morning, small and fragile, clutching a wooden toy train. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, the state forensic anthropologist, worked with the delicate precision of an archaeologist, her brush revealing bones that hadn't seen daylight for nearly 3 decades. Caucasian male, approximately 4 years old, she announced to the assembled team. Based on the clothing remnants and toy, I'd estimate burial occurred in the mid to late 1990s. Detective Sarah Chen felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't what she'd expected to find. She'd come looking for 4 missing nuns and instead discovered something far more horrific. As the excavation continued, the truth became undeniable. 17 small graves arranged in neat rows beneath what had once been St. Catherine's dining hall. Children who had supposedly been adopted into loving families had never left the orphanage at all. Sheriff Bradley's radio crackled. "Tom, you need to get down here. We found something else." In a separate section of the basement, excavators had uncovered a metal box, waterproofed and deliberately buried. Inside, Detective Chen found the smoking gun that would unravel 28 years of carefully constructed lies. The documents were meticulously organized, as if someone had prepared them for exactly this moment. Fake adoption papers bearing forged signatures of judges and social workers, bank records showing payments of $50,000 per child to offshore accounts, and most damning of all, a ledger in handwriting Sarah now recognized as belonging to Mother Superior Catherine Brennan, listing children by name, age, and the amounts paid for them. Timothy Walsh, 3 years, $45,000, delivered to Chicago buyer March 1997. Maria Santos, 18 months, $60,000, delivered to New York buyer March 1997. Baby John Doe, 6 months, $75,000, died during transport, disposed of. Each entry was a child's life, reduced to a financial transaction. But it was the final entry that made Sarah's blood run cold. March 15th, 1997, sisters Margaret, Catherine, Teresa, and Anne-Marie discovered basement operations, attempted to contact authorities. Eliminated by associates. Bodies disposed of in river. Cover story, disappeared during routine visit. At the bottom of the page, 2 signatures, Mother Superior Catherine Brennan and Sheriff William Morrison. Sarah's hands shook as she photographed the document. Sheriff Morrison had been Bradley's predecessor, a man she'd known personally. He'd given the speech at her academy graduation. She'd trusted him, looked up to him. And he'd been part of a child trafficking ring that murdered 4 innocent nuns to protect their secret. The evidence painted a picture of systematic evil that reached into every level of the community. Dr. Patricia Westbrook, the county coroner in 1997, had falsified death certificates for children who were actually sold. Judge Harold Fleming had signed adoption orders for families that didn't exist. Even Father Michael Donnelly, the orphanage chaplain, had received monthly payments for his silence. As news of the discovery spread, the town of Jefferson City found itself under siege. Media trucks lined Main Street. FBI agents commandeered the courthouse, and families who thought they'd put their past behind them found themselves face to face with the darkest chapter in their community's history. Margaret O'Brien's nephew, David, drove down from Kansas City when he heard about the discovery. He'd been 8 years old when his aunt disappeared, and he'd carried her memory like a sacred flame for 28 years. She used to tell me that God put her on earth to protect children, he said, tears streaming down his weathered face as he stood at the excavation site. I used to wonder why God let something happen to her. Now I know. She died protecting these babies. She died being exactly who she was supposed to be. The FBI's investigation expanded rapidly. Financial records revealed the trafficking ring had operated from 1995 to 1999, processing over 60 children. Some had been legitimately adopted through legal channels, but others had simply vanished into a network of wealthy buyers who paid premium prices for healthy infants and toddlers. Agent Patricia Williams, who headed the federal task force, discovered that Mother Superior Brennan had fled to Ireland immediately after the orphanage closed in 2003. She'd been living under an assumed name in County Cork, working as a private nurse for wealthy families. When Irish authorities arrested her at a cottage overlooking the Atlantic, she was caring for twin infant boys whose parents had died in a car accident. She claimed she was reformed, Agent Williams told Sarah during one of their coordination meetings. Said she'd found God again and was doing penance for her sins. But we found forged documents in her possession and evidence she'd been facilitating illegal adoptions in Europe for the past 15 years. The trial of Catherine Brennan became a media sensation. The woman who took the stand bore little resemblance to the commanding figure in the old photographs. At 73, she appeared frail and broken, her grey hair thin, her hands trembling as she answered questions. Her testimony revealed the scope of the operation. The trafficking ring had connections to organized crime families in Chicago and New York. Children were taken to safe houses, given new identities, and sold to couples who couldn't navigate traditional adoption processes or who wanted to avoid background checks. "I told myself I was helping these children find homes," Brennan said, her voice barely audible in the packed courtroom. The state system was overwhelmed. These babies deserved better than foster care. But somewhere along the way, it became about money, and when those nuns started asking questions, she broke down completely when shown photographs of the four sisters. They were good women, better than me. Sister Margaret looked me in the eye and said, "Catherine, we know what you're doing and we can't let it continue." I was scared. The people I was working with, they didn't make idle threats. The conspiracy reached its tentacles into shocking places. Sheriff Morrison's successor, Thomas Bradley, had to recuse himself from the case when investigators discovered his campaign had received donations from shell companies connected to the trafficking ring. The current bishop of the Jefferson City Diocese was forced to resign when records showed the church had received substantial donations from Mother Superior Brennan throughout the 1990s. Dr. Westbrook, now in her 80s and suffering from dementia, was deemed unfit to stand trial. Judge Fleming had died of a heart attack in 2018, taking his secrets to the grave. Father Donnelly hanged himself in his rectory 2 days after the FBI raided his home. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, one of the children listed in the ledger as sold to a New York buyer, had survived. Now 31 years old and working as a social worker in Brooklyn, she'd been raised by parents who genuinely believed they were participating in a private but legal adoption. "They loved me," Maria testified via video link, her voice steady despite the tears. "My parents saved every penny for 2 years to afford the adoption fees. They thought they were giving a home to a child who needed one. They never knew the truth about where I came from." Her testimony humanized the tragedy in a way that statistics couldn't. Behind every transaction in Mother Superior Brennan's ledger was a child stolen from their future, families destroyed by greed, and a community's trust shattered by those sworn to protect the innocent. As the legal proceedings dragged on, Detective Sarah Chen found herself returning again and again to the small cemetery behind St. Catherine's ruins. The 17 children had been reburied with dignity, their graves marked with headstones bearing their names when known and simple crosses when they weren't. But it was the memorial to the 4 nuns that drew her most often: Sister Margaret O'Brien, Sister Catherine Walsh, Sister Teresa Rodriguez, and Sister Anne Marie Dubois. Their bodies had never been recovered from the Missouri River, but their sacrifice had finally brought justice to the children they died trying to protect. On the anniversary of the discovery, David O'Brien organized a memorial service that drew hundreds of people, families who had adopted children from St. Catherine's through legitimate channels, social workers and police officers who had worked tirelessly to verify the fates of every child who had passed through the orphanage doors, and survivors like Maria Santos, who had traveled from across the country to honor the women who had given their lives for children they barely knew. "My Aunt Margaret had a saying," David told the assembled crowd. "She used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right even when you're terrified." Those 4 women walked into that basement knowing they might not walk out, but they couldn't live with themselves if they stayed silent. Catherine Brennan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At her sentencing, she asked to make a statement. Standing slowly, she looked directly at the families of the victims. "I destroyed so many lives in pursuit of money and power. I betrayed my vows, my faith, and the children I was supposed to protect. I killed 4 women whose only crime was caring too much. I will spend whatever time I have left trying to make amends, but I know that nothing I do can bring back the innocence I stole from this community." She paused, her voice breaking. "Sister Margaret O'Brien asked me once why I became a nun. I told her it was to serve God. She said, 'Then remember that we serve him best when we serve the least of these.' I forgot that truth, and it cost us everything." Detective Sarah Chen closed the case file on a cold February morning in 2027. More than a year after that first anonymous letter had arrived on her desk, the investigation had consumed her life, changed her community forever, and brought a measure of justice to victims who had waited nearly 3 decades for the truth. As she locked the file away, she thought about Robert Henley, the maintenance worker whose deathbed confession had started it all. He'd carried the weight of those secrets for 28 years, but in the end, his conscience had proven stronger than his fear. The last entry in his journal, written just days before his death, had become something of a prayer for everyone touched by the case. I can't bring back those children, I can't save those nuns, but maybe, if someone reads this after I'm gone, their deaths won't be meaningless. Maybe the truth will finally set us all free. Outside the courthouse, the Missouri wind carried the scent of spring rain across the hills where St. Catherine's Home for Children once stood, where 17 small graves had been discovered and honored, where 4 brave women had made the ultimate sacrifice to protect the innocent. The truth had indeed set them free, all of them.